Steve drifted weightlessly until he landed into a red landscape of the Nether. Filled with lava pools, the Nether didn't track time with day and night like the overworld. Steve looked at his compass to find his direction, only to see the needle on the compass go in circles. Compasses and clocks were useless in the Nether. As he adjusted to the crimson glow of the Nether, Steve cautiously explored his new landscape. This was like any place Steve had ever been, and his eyes had to adjust to the new lighting. The Nether was dangerous, but it was also filled with many useful resources. Mushrooms sprouted from the ground, and Steve saw a lava pool in the distance. Steve landed over to pick a mushroom and knew that a fermented spider eye he had from the spider jockey mixed with some sugar could create a potion. Before he could grab his first mushroom, he heard the high-pitched sound of a ghast, its white boxy body with tentacles floating by with its eyes closed. Steve quickly surveyed the area for a good hiding place. Stepping too close to a lava pool would kill him, and there were no trees to hide behind or scary caves to provide shelter. As the ghast passed, Steve gasped, had limited vision, and couldn't see him. If he had hid behind some leaves or glass, but there was nothing in sight. Another option was going back through the portal, but then he'd have to face the armored zombie. Also, he couldn't go back to the village until he had a plan to save Avery the librarian and the other villagers, and himself. He tried to remain quiet, hoping the ghast would float by, but it was too late. The ghast saw Steve, opened its demonic red eyes, and readied himself for an attack. The ghast looked like a jellyfish with white tentacles sprouting from its underbelly. It made a chirping noise, singing it was attacking. Without armor or a sword, Steve was defenseless and had no way to shield the attack. The ghast's cavernous mouth opened wide as a red-hot fireball emerged. The flames glistened as the fireball rushed towards the breezy nether sky. Steve didn't have time to dodge the fiery mess. With a single throw of his fist, he hit the fireball and reacted it towards the ghast. The ghast let out a pained wail as it exploded. Steve made his way through the Nether and walked past lava waterfalls until he came upon a patch of soul sand. While collecting the blocks of sand, he could see a nether fortress in the distance, past a large field of lava. Suddenly, Steve had an idea. Diamonds could be found in nether fortresses. If Steve obtained enough diamonds, he could craft a powerful diamond sword to attack the armored zombie. "I will use 40 diamonds," Steve said, although he was alone and had nobody to talk to. He missed his cavernous conversations with Elliot the blacksmith, and comfort him to simply hear words out loud, even if nobody was listening. He paused, and with great hope exclaimed, "And with those diamonds, I will create the most powerful sword in the world. I will use it to slay the armored zombie and help the villagers." "Diamonds?" a voice called out, and Steve realized he wasn't alone. "Who are you?" Steve asked. "I'm Jack," the voice replied, and he came out from behind blocks. He wore blue diamond armor. "Wow, you have diamond armor?" Steve was impressed. He was always wary of the strangers. He could be a griefer, but Steve was lonely and wanted company. "If you give me an iron ingot, I can teach you how to travel the void," said Jack. The void was an area in the Nether that had no hostile mobs. Steve had heard that it was a safe way to travel through the scary land. For just one iron ingot? Steve was shocked. That was a small request for such an enormous task. "Yes," Jack said as Steve gave him the ingot. Suddenly, Jack took out a diamond sword and leapt towards Steve. Steve jumped back. "I want everything in your inventory," demanded Jack. "Now!" The blue sword glistened in the dark red Nether. Steve sprinted towards the lava pool, but he couldn't escape. It was either drown in the hot lava or be destroyed by Jack's sword. Suddenly, Jack and Steve heard a chirping sound. It was a ghast. It fired at them. Jack ran to avoid the flame, accidentally pushing Steve away, and Jack tripped into a lava pool. Steve wanted to grab the diamond sword from Jack the Griefer, but it was too late, as it was already covered in lava. To even rush for the tip of the handle could result in Steve being burned or destroyed. He also didn't have time to get it, since he had a ghast attacking him. Steve quickly exchanged his sword for a bow and arrow, and with one hit, he knocked the ghast. "Gotcha!" Steve shouted as the ghast was destroyed. Then he looked around nervously, remembering the last time he had shouted out loud. He had scared another griefer would come, and he needed to be prepared. Steve had encountered his first griefer and had walked away alive. With the victories over the ghast, he had begun to feel confident as he walked across the nether. Bringing over a sea of lava, he passed enormous columns made of nether brick that seemed to stretch as far as the sky. Small fires burned on the ground, and he jumped to avoid them. He paid close attention to the ground beneath his feet, because he never knew what might encounter in the nether. He made his way towards the nether fortress, as it was hopefully that he could find diamonds and save his friends. As he jumped over a small pool of lava, a zombie pigman leapt out, ready to attack Steve. The pink pig with a box-shaped head and rotting flesh was armored with a sword and in attack mode. I can't seem to shake zombies, Steve thought as he built a 3-block wall to shield him from the zombie pigman. Then he jumped up high and knocked the zombie pigman to the ground. This attack spawned a group of zombie pigmen all ready to attack Steve. Using cobblestone blocks, he constructed a booth with 4 walls and mined a hole in the bottom of the booth. He used the blocks to strike the zombie pigmen as each zombie was defeated. It dropped iron ingots. Steve quickly collected the iron and crafted them into a sword. Touting his new sword, Steve made his escape towards the nether fortress to find his diamonds. Flying above the fortress and aiming for Steve was a blaze. Its yellow body and black eyes flew above the fortress and shot at Steve as he grabbed the majestic fortress made of nether blocks. Steve grabbed another block to shield himself from the fiery blows of the blaze was unleashing on him. The blaze spawned 2 more blazes appeared, both fired at him. The flames landed incredibly close to Steve. To hit to his body, almost burning his new gold sword, and a blaze dropped a blaze rod by his feet. Steve picked it up, knowing it would be useful when brewing potions. Steve barely missed another blaze. He knew the only way to survive this clash with the blaze was to craft an enchanted golden apple. He had been planning on crafting an enchanted golden apple when he returned to the village to cure Elliot the blacksmith, but he had to use it now. Enchanted golden apples also had the power to shield people from fire for 5 minutes, and at that moment, Steve was being blasted with heat. Enchanted golden apples were expensive to craft, but as the flames flew at Steve's body, it was his only option. Steve crafted an enchanted golden apple with gold blocks and an apple from his inventory. Then he ate it all in one bite. Saved from the fire for 5 minutes, it was a race against the clock as he battled the 3 blazes that were now standing in front of the fortress. The power was diminished due to the enchanted golden apple, but they were still skilled as they tried to smash Steve to the ground. Steve unleashed his mighty iron sword and destroyed the blazes, collecting the points and the blazes dropped after defeating them, which the glow of victory Steve entered the grounded fortress. The fortress walls were decorated with glowstone blocks. The yellow light emanating from the slab seemed to reflect off the nether blocks and the light room. The ambience gave the fortress a feeling of being both grand and cozy. Steve had never seen anything so beautiful. He quickly eyed for any blazes that might be spawning in the fortress, but he didn't see any around. He knew ghast couldn't survive in other fortresses because ghast couldn't survive in enclosed places, and the buildings were made of materials that could withstand a ghast blast. This enabled Steve to relax and soak in the awesomeness of the grand fortress. In the center of the interior room, Steve saw an enormous staircase made with nether bricks with soul sand, and nether wart was growing on the ground on both sides of the staircase. Steve walked down the staircase and reached over to pick up one of the nether warts, which was an essential ingredient to have when making potions. As he reached to pick up the first batch, a blaze emerged from behind a wall. Steve minded nether blocks covering him with the flame-resistant blocks, and he plunged his sword into the blaze and watched it fall to the floor in agony. The minute the blaze died, a dark red and brown cube jumped from a lava pool to the center of the staircase. Its eyes looked like flames, and for a second Steve was mesmerized. He had never seen a magma cube before. Any instant of its eyes had Steve's attention. Of course, he knew the magma cube was hostile, and he had to defeat it. With a swift blow from his sword, the magma cube fell back and split in two. Steve jumped towards the multiple cubes and struck each one until they were killed. Magma cream oozed from the cube, and Steve ran to pick it up due to its value in the nether. With his eyes peeled from the hostile mobs, Steve walked away. Through the fortress in search of the rare diamonds. The rooms were empty. Another explorer must have been in the fortress before him. And an empty, if it is treasure, he could see blazes spawning in the room as Steve rushed from the fortress back into the wide open nether. He had hoped to find another fortress to get diamonds. Steve could only see lava pools and fires. It could take him days to find another fortress, and his food bar was getting very low. He couldn't continue searching in the nether. He had to make his way back to the overworld, where he could hunt for cows to fill his food bar. He also couldn't return to the portal he had used to get here to the nether, because it would bring him back into the zombie attack. Steve had to make another portal, which meant he had to land in the foreign land. This frightened Steve, but it was his only option. Steve constructed the frame using more of the obsidian from his bag. He set it on fire and leapt into the portal. He had no idea where he wound up when he stepped out. Steve missed his wheat farm and Snuggles' meows. He hoped that his home and his ocelot would still be there when he returned to the overworld. He secretly feared he'd never make his way back. As he transported between the two worlds, he closed his eyes and pretended he was at his old, comfy wool bed.